Okay, so I've had several people ask me about the decision that I made to buy an airplane versus renting an airplane and kind of the cost differences and that sort of stuff. So in this video, that's what I'm going to be talking about. Okay, so naturally I bought a Cessna 182. However, there are many small airplanes out there available for purchase and rent. Some are cheaper, some are more expensive. So let me kind of first explain why I went with the Cessna 182. I wanted something that could carry a bigger payload than a 172. I wanted something that was a little bit bigger and a little bit faster. I originally looked at some of the Bonanzas and retractable gear, but quickly realized that with retractable gear, the annual inspection cost and insurance cost goes up significantly. With that said, the cheaper options that I did most of my flying in when I was renting airplanes was the Cherokee 160s and 180s, as well as the Cessna 172s. So in this video, I'm going to give a price breakdown on purchasing those 172s and the Cherokees, as well as my experience purchasing a 182. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm going to do a comparison on buying versus renting based on 100 hours of flight time per year. If you fly less than that, it might be better to rent. If you fly more, then that just justifies your case for purchasing even more. With some of the fixed costs, of course, the amount of flight hour do not matter. You're going to have to pay those costs no matter if you fly 0 hours or 3,000 hours a year. But with fuel and maintenance and oil and the variable costs, those of course will depend on how much you're flying. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is the cost, then I'll talk about kind of the scheduling and the freedom of owning your own airplane as well. So first with the cost, you can find Cessna 172s and or Cherokee 160s out on the market right now for somewhere around $55,000. I've did a lot of research when I was looking to buy a plane, and I saw plenty of them around that price point. If you find a plane for the purchase price of $55,000, most finance companies are going to want you to put down between 15 and 20% down payment. 20% down payment on that would be $11,000. In my experience, I was approved for an interest rate of 8% for a term of 15 years. You can get longer terms, but on older airplanes, finance companies seem to be skeptical in doing that. So at 8% for 15 years on a $55,000 loan with $11,000 down, your monthly payment is $420 a month. While I don't know the exact insurance cost of these planes, because I purchased a 182, so the insurance is a little bit more expensive, if I had to guess just apples to apples comparison, I would estimate that the insurance on a 172 or Cherokee equivalent would be around $1,100 for the year. In my area, tie down fees is another fixed cost that you have to pay monthly. And in my area, I've experienced those to be around $40 a month. Fuel is another thing that you will have to pay for. And in my area, it varies tremendously. However, taking the surrounding airports near me and finding the average, I have found that self-serve fuel prices for 100 low-lead avgas is around $5.80 per gallon. For a 172, I would estimate that in my area, the annual inspection cost would be between $1,500 and $1,800 for the year for the annual inspection. We're going to estimate on the high side and say $1,800. And then as far as the miscellaneous costs, the maintenance costs, the unknowns, the putting money away for reserve, just kind of the miscellaneous bucket, oil changes, things like that, I would just allot about $3,500 a year for a 172. That number was kind of just pulled out of my rear end. I really have no idea. I'm just estimating. So now let's talk about some totals with owning a 172. Again, these are all estimates, but I think they are very accurate estimates. They're educated guesses, I think. For your loan payment, at times 12 months is $5,040 a year. Insurance, $1,100 a year. Tie down, $480 a year. Fuel costs at $5.80 a gallon. In a 172, I'm estimating around 7 to 7.5 gallons on average of burn, times, that'd be per hour, times 100 hours of flight time a year, for a total of $4,350 a year in fuel. Annual inspection, $1,800. Miscellaneous bucket, kind of reserve money, $3,500. For a grand total estimate cost to own your own plane and fly that plane per year of $16,270. Now let's look at renting a 172. And again, this is based on my area and my experience. Right now, the average rental cost for a 172 is a wet rate of $185 per hour. And then quite frankly, the only other expenditure that you're going to have renting, not owning, would be your renter's insurance, which in my experience is around $310 per year. So $185 an hour to rent times 100 hours a year is $18,500. Plus the $310 renter's insurance is $18,810 per year. So you see that in this scenario, renting a plane is more expensive than the $16,270 to own your plane. And I cannot stress enough, this is just a rough estimate in my area based on 100 hours of flight time per year. So now I want to look at the Cessna 182 because that is a little bit different. It burns fuel differently. The rental cost on those is different, etc. And a Cessna 182 is what I ended up purchasing. These numbers that I'm going to give you are not my exact numbers. These are just estimates with my information in mind based on experience and prices in my area. So while I won't discuss the price that I paid for the plane and how much money I put as a down payment, etc., I can tell you that my loan payment is $458 per month. The insurance on my plane, based on my flight hours, my ratings, my licenses, is $1,309 per year. The tie-down cost doesn't matter if you have a 172 or a 182, so we're still going to save $40 a month for the tie-down. Fuel costs, again, are the same. It takes the same amount of fuel. I'm averaging $5.80 per gallon, even though the plane burns more per hour. Annual inspection costs might be a little bit higher on this just because of the propeller, but it's basically the same plane on a 182 versus a 172. So I'm just going to estimate a number of $2,000 a year for the annual inspection. The miscellaneous bucket maintenance oil change cost bucket that I've came up with, I'm still going to put $3,500 per year in that. So getting our annual totals with $458 per month on the loan payment, that is $5,496 per year. $1,309 a year on the insurance, $480 per year on the tie down. And with fuel costs, I'm estimating between 11.5 and 12 gallons per hour on average times the 100 hours of flight time per year for $6,670 per year average estimated fuel costs. Annual inspection $2,000 and the miscellaneous monies $3,500. So for the annual cost for owning a 182, average estimated $19,455. Renting a 182 in my area, the rental cost jumps up significantly. I did rent a 182 for a short period of time to get checked out on the plane, and the rental cost on a 182 is $230 per hour. The renter's insurance stayed right around the same at $310 per year. So $230 an hour for rent times the 100 hours of flight time per year is $23,000. $310 for the insurance puts a grand total at renting a Cessna 182 estimated at $23,310, as opposed to the $19,455 to own. Now that we've got all the pricing out of the way, you might say, well, yes, it is cheaper to own, but it's still average of $20,000 a year to own. Of course it is. Nothing in aviation is cheap. You do this because it's what you like to do. Okay, so that's the cost conversation. The next thing is the freedom and frequency. And the reason I say that is I'm a big fan of Charlie Gasmere with Airplane Academy on YouTube, and he talks about the 3 F's for making the decision to own an airplane is freedom, frequency, and finances. Finances, we've already talked about. And you can, of course, run the math if you were to fly 70 hours a year versus 100, if you were to fly 150 hours a year, you can kind of get that break-even point by doing your own math. So now let's talk about the freedom and frequency. And basically what he discusses and what I've learned and truly believe in is starting with the freedom. If you're renting a plane, are you able to do what you want when you want? In my case, the answer to that was no. I have flown with 2 different flight clubs as well as 1 flight school that had rental options, and they only allowed you to land on runways that were up to a certain distance long, or as short as a certain distance long. For example, 1 flight school, I was not allowed to land on any runways that were shorter than 3,000 feet. The other thing is the timing. When you rent a plane, in my situation, because everybody's becoming busy and more people are wanting to get into aviation, the schedule was so booked out that I was having to schedule a plane for 2 weeks out sometimes. Just a random example, if I was to schedule on a Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m., 2 Saturdays from now, and then it rains that day, Well, now I'm not flying for 2 weeks because now I have to book another 2 weeks out. Even if the weather was nice, let's say that Saturday I didn't want to fly exactly at 2 p.m. You see why it's sort of beneficial to own a plane where I don't have to worry about that. And then let's just say that the weather was great and I did want to fly at 2 p.m. I was always stressed and kind of anxious about let's hurry up and go do what we're going to do so I can fly back and get it back by 4 p.m. so that the next person can rent the plane that has the time slot after me. So that's kind of the scheduling thing and the what you're allowed to do. Obviously, when you're renting a plane, you're renting it for a reason. You're not allowed to do what you want to do because it's not your plane. So in the case I mentioned, they didn't want you landing on anything less than 3,000 feet. They didn't want you landing on anything besides hard surface runway. You couldn't land on any grass strips or dirt strips. And then the timing too. You know, the flight school and the flight clubs would shut down at a certain time. So sometimes it became difficult for me to get my nighttime currency to go fly at. In the summertime, it doesn't get dark here until almost 9 o'clock. You wait 1 hour after sunset for your nighttime landings. You're looking at 10 o'clock at night, and the flight schools are not open then. So I was not able to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. So that kind of was freedom and frequency all in one. The freedom is what I wanted to do. The frequency is when I wanted to do it. If I wanted to go fly 3 times a week, that was very difficult to do with such a busy flight school and busy flight clubs. Whereas now that I own a plane, I can fly 6 times a week if I want, or I can not fly for 3 weeks if I want to. And there's just a little less planning involved owning my own plane. I don't have to think about it as much and stress about the schedule. I can just be more spontaneous. I can wake up on a Saturday morning, have no plans for the day, drive to the airport, pre-flight the plane, and in 20 minutes I'm out of there going to do what I want to do instead of having to check in with the flight club, get the book, record the times on the plane, all the kind of procedural stuff that's involved when you rent a plane. So I hope that answers some of your questions and kind of explains my thought process behind why I wanted to buy a plane versus rent a plane. And quite frankly, for some people, it may be less about the finances and more about the freedom and frequency. In the examples of costs that I gave earlier, it made sense to own a plane versus renting a plane from a cost standpoint. However, let's say that it costs a little bit more money to own than it does to fly. Let's say it costs $20,000 a year to rent, but it costs $21,000 a year to own. It's more expensive to own, but maybe the freedom and frequency aspect that I talked about, doing what you want when you want, is more important. So that $1,000 may be more important to you. I will say, however, if you're only flying 30 hours a year, if you're flying 1 flight a month, that's 3 hours, and that's all you're doing, it's probably better off that you rent. Because the other side of this that I have not experienced yet, but I've done research on and I know it's coming, is when you own a plane, you are responsible for everything. You're responsible for the inspections, the maintenance, the upkeep, the airworthiness, etc. So when you rent, you don't have to worry about that. You pay hourly rate. You're done when you're done. When you own, you are responsible for that. Okay, if you have anything to add, have any questions, comments, or concerns, comment down below and I will read them and I will answer you, as long as they're polite and respectful and not rude and disrespectful. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. Now that I have a plane, I'm going to be hoping to pump out more and more aviation content. You can also follow me on Instagram at @TheNickHarrison. I've said it before and I'll say it again now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.